Welcome everybody to the second and final day of our two-day workshop session, exchange of ideas between German researchers, American researchers, and all kinds of people who are working in the area of urban energy. I'm not an expert. In fact, I was just chatting with somebody that my only experience with the German energy system was that I taught English for a while at a German coal power plant in Gelsenkirchen, with little success, I have to say, but little success in terms of how good their English was afterwards. But I learned a lot about coal-fired power plants. So that's my experience. So I have to trust all the experts that told me yesterday was an extremely successful and extremely productive day of idea exchanges. And today we will hear some of the results of what was talked about yesterday all day. Some of the organizations that discussed yesterday will introduce their programs today and some of the results of what they did yesterday. And mostly we will also want to hear from you and your input about your questions and so on the issue of energy systems and business models for a sustainable urban transformation. And as residents of New York and the surrounding areas, we're all well aware of how important that type of thing is. I was just telling somebody that my apartment in Brooklyn is still fired by with the heating technology that was built when the apartment was built in 1908, which means they pump a lot of hot air through the pipes in the middle of the night, and we all know what that's like. So a few words about the GCRI. My name is Gerrit Rossler. I represent the German Center for Research and Innovation. We are actually just down the street here on 49th Street and First Avenue in the so-called German House. We are an organization that showcases German research excellence and German innovation, and we try to bring you guys, bring the German researchers and innovators and thinkers and thought leaders in contact with their American counterparts, as well as with a general audience in the United States interested in what's going on in Germany. We are funded by the German Foreign Office, and the directorship, the governance of the GCRI is with the German Academic Exchange Service, the DAAD. You've met some members of my excellent team downstairs. You met McKenna Andrews, our intern, as well as Julia Jonscheda, our program officer, and Julia actually deserves a lot of the credit for yesterday's event and today's event in terms of helping organize it and put it on. So if you see her later on, please extend your thanks. We also have an executive director, Dr. Nina Lemmens. She's on an airplane to Germany right now to speak with the steering committee of all the GCRIs worldwide, because there's 5 of us. We're here in New York. There's Tokyo, Sao Paulo, New Delhi, and Moscow. And between the 5 GCRIs, we try to complete this mission of showcasing German research. Today's event is in collaboration with the University of Applied Sciences of Stuttgart, and some of their representatives will speak in a minute and say a little bit more about what they do. But thanks again for the excellent cooperation and for your input and for approaching us on about this and doing this with us. Another partner and collaborator for this event is the Urban Tech Hub here at Grand Central Tech. And in the conversations that I've had with their executive director, I've already gotten a very good sense that this isn't the last event we're doing together. In fact, we already have grand ideas for new collaborations, but I think this is a good place for me to stop and actually introduce the executive director of the Urban Tech Hub, Mr. Robinson Hernandez. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerrit. Much appreciated. So welcome all of you to the Urban Tech Hub. Very excited to have you all here. I don't know how many of you are familiar with what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm just going to provide you with a quick little overview before I introduce our next speaker. The Urban Tech Hub is a collaboration with the City of New York. We're looking at ways of trying to really reposition New York as a smart city in the world. We hear about amazing stuff that's going on around the world, and New York realized that there was a lot of effort, a lot of activity, a lot of investors. This is the second largest tech ecosystem in the US. And we wanted to find ways of being able to concentrate some of that or harness some of that talent, that power. And so in collaboration with the city of New York, we created what was called the Urban Tech Hub. And it's supposed to serve as a home for the urban tech community. That means clean tech, transportation, mobility, open data, IoT, all of the different technologies that are transforming how we live our day-to-day lives. And so as a result, we now have this entire floor that's 4,600 square meters or roughly 50,000 square feet of space, almost fully occupied with companies that are really pioneers in how we engage technology to help our day-to-day life. And so you have companies, some of the companies, in fact, that you're going to hear from today are companies that are members, like Block Power and Clean Choice Energy, that are utilizing technology in a way to make it so much easier for us to be able to retrofit our buildings, make them more clean conscious, more clean energy friendly, finding ways of being able to use alternative energies like solar as well as wind in how we engage, and how we use our energy. So Garrett talked a little bit about, his energy system at home. I have the same thing, this boiler system that clangs every single night. It's the most annoying thing. And so I need to talk to the owner, which happens to be me, about finding a way of being able to fix that. And so it's funny how I've now started to look online to find ways of being able to embrace some of those technology solutions. And so there are ways of being able to put smart detectors that will allow me not only to reduce my bill, but to provide reliable, consistent energy use to not only my apartment, but the apartment upstairs. And so you're seeing a lot of that cool energy, that cool camaraderie take place here in New York City. And that's what makes us very excited of being able to partner with the German Center for Research and Innovation, with the University Center of Applied Sciences in Stuttgart. Because we know that this is not just a local thing, it's really a global thing. In fact, a third of the companies in our space are international. We realize that by bringing together all of these different companies, we're creating this knowledge base. So I invite you to take a look at what we're doing here, have a conversation with myself, with the other members, just with folks around. Feel free to walk around the space, get to see what's happening. This is the cool new energy that's taking place in New York City. And what we'd love to do is to find ways of being able to partner with you. We're excited, New York City is also a pioneer, not just what we're doing here, but they're implementing a couple of cool new systems. The Lower Manhattan Smart Neighborhood Pilot, which is looking at how do we deploy sensors to be able to tell whether we're being efficient in the use of energy. There's a smart grid demonstration that's taking place at the Brooklyn Army Terminal, which is one of our larger industrial users here in the city. And so they're finding ways of being able to put a smart grid solution there. A solar thermal pilot program in the city of New York, where they're offering city owners an opportunity of being able to access financing to implement solar energy products. And so the momentum's there. It's our opportunity to take advantage of that. And that's why it's always helpful to have these types of discussions where we bring the international community, the national community, and the local community together to find solutions to doing this. And so tonight you're going to hear from an amazing group of speakers who are all going to provide a lot of insight into what their efforts look like in trying to promote a lot more in how urban modeling is going to take place in the transformation of how our cities operate. And so I'm not going to go through and introduce everyone. I'm going to introduce the next speaker. And so just to get it right, Ursula Eicher, who's the professor and head of the HFT Research and Research Center for Sustainable Energy Technologies, who's an amazing individual I met a year ago, and we corrected this. It's a couple of months ago, half a year ago. We see such long-term friends already, besties. And it was really cool. We started talking about what was taking place and how we could work together. And this is the collaboration, the culmination of how this type of, where a discussion results in an opportunity for this topic to take place in New York City. So welcome to the Urban Tech Hub at Grand Central Tech. We're very excited to have you guys be here. And Ursula, thank you so much. Welcome to the Hub. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Robinson, for the very friendly introduction. And we've been here all day yesterday, and we were told this is a very unusual format to have a full-day workshop, because the time span of Americans is normally much, much shorter. We should not spend more than 90 minutes maximum on a workshop, but we did it all day and everybody stayed to the end. So we had a really detailed discussion with a lot of companies, and some of them came in quite spontaneously to join this event, which we had prepared, obviously, longer ago. But so the challenge is now to condense this sort of full day workshop into 90 minutes so that we can have some drinks more or less punctually at 7 o'clock. So that will be a bit the challenge. So we told everybody to sort of condense their presentations from yesterday. We had long discussions. We will have, you can ask questions, obviously, because it's meant to be an interactive event. But obviously, we don't want to spend the whole night on talking about these topics that we find very interesting. I don't know whether you find them very interesting. I mean, I'll show you a bit what we have been doing in Germany. The title, as you see, is already it's quite technical. So I try to give you a bit of an insight who we are, what our network is like, and what kind of topics we address in this energy transition that Robinson talked about. We are a larger group of universities in southern Germany and companies, and we work and we brought 2 colleagues from the group. You will hear later from them, both on business models and on energy technologies. We work very closely with real case studies, and on that slide you see a bit sort of the scope of our actions. I mean, we really want to implement the energy transition in the residential sector, in sort of touristic sites, like this is a small island in the Lake of Constance, in commercial districts like the Bosch plant here. So in very different sort of settlements, I would say, urban areas, which have completely different challenges. I mean, an industrial site has a very, very high electricity and cooling consumption, whereas residential is mainly heating dominated. So we have really different challenges. And to know where we should go, I mean, everybody wants to go climate neutral in 2050. I think the goals are really, really similar between New York and Germany especially, but we don't know how to do it. And as Robinson said, I mean, it's a lot of individual choices to be made, change of heating system, change to renewable energy technology. It's a very difficult process, and we need tools, and we're working on modeling tools to simulate in advance what kind of options are the best to get to the goal that we all agree on. I mean, at least New York agrees on, maybe not the US on the whole, but most of us agree that we need to drastically reduce CO2 emissions. So I'm going to talk to you shortly about the way we approach this modeling topic. And I think what made this possible, I would say, is that today we have an amazing amount of data on cities. And you see these kind of models, 3-dimensional geometry of cities is available in all of Germany, in New York as well. So I'll show you later a small example. I mean, because there are sort of pretty regular flights over the cities, they scan the surfaces with a laser method, and then automatically these urban models are generated. And they are really useful. They can be used for heat demand calculations, that what we do, acoustic analysis, flood predictions, and many other applications, but also sort of commercial or real estate applications. So that's how we started. We took this 3D data, which is a real amazing source, and tried to combine our modeling capabilities to simulate the energy demand of every individual building in the city. And that's what you typically get. Here, the green ones are the good guys who have already refurbished their buildings, and the red ones have a high heating consumption and need refurbishment. Once we know this, we simulate the energy demand. We can then do scenarios and say, what does it cost to refurbish the worst consumers, the highest absolute consumers, what happens if we increase the rate of refurbishment, and so on. So our main focus so far has been to look at the buildings and their energy demand, heating, cooling mainly, which is related to the building volume and the construction properties. Electricity demand is a different story. It's more dependent on users, on appliances, and so on. But the heating demand depends very much on the building properties. So that's one thing we can now very automatically calculate for thousands of buildings. And then we can also automatically design district heating and cooling networks, because we know more or less the energy demand, we know where the streets are, so you can completely automate this process of saying how much or what kind of size of district heating network do I need for this kind of heating demand? What happens if the demand goes down because people start to refurbish buildings? What does it do to the heating network? Is it getting less efficient? Do we have more heat losses and so on? These are typical questions. And once you've got a good 3D model, and as I said, we have this, you can then compare options. And in new constructions, this was a project we did on a green field where a new construction took place. And we got these plans. So 4 different urban planners made a competition. And they proposed these sort of typologies. And they asked us, what is the best energy performance of these objects? And if you just look at them, you might get an idea, but it's pretty hard to say. Can they be zero carbon? So can they generate all the energy they need by local renewables? So is this one here, this one won the competition. So really complicated roof structures. We said, well, maybe it's not enough space for photovoltaics or for local renewables, and it's not a very compact form. Maybe this is better, really compact and connected and so on. Pretty boring, I mean, no roof terraces. So that's why this one won, because energy in the end is not the main criteria. The main criteria is normally how the spaces look and what the use is, and in this case, they wanted roof terraces, and that's why it won. But we wanted to know what does it do to the energy performance, so we used our modeling tools, and we checked sort of all kinds of insulation standards, and I don't want to go into the details, just what we normally have. Okay, you've got a winning competition, one urban form. As you see, there's not much difference between the urban forms, whether it's these ones or even a much more compact one. But you have additional cost if you insulate the buildings more. So if you want to reduce 30% your heating demand compared to legal requirements, you pay 60 euros per square meter extra, just because you need insulation. If you want to go to 60%, this is probably the best standard that we have in Germany now, this 60% lower heating demand than legal requirements. You pay about 100 euro or $100, it's more or less the same, $100 per square meter extra. And normally the investors say, well, I just do legal requirements, but because why should I pay 100 euros extra? Just for insulation, I don't care. I fulfill my legal requirements, and that's it. But I think there we need to change a bit our way of thinking. If you look, I mean, if you build a new house, it will not only stay there for a few years. It should operate for 40 years, for 100 years. I mean, and if you accumulate the heating costs over 100 years, you see in the end the best insulation standard is the cheapest, because the investment is higher, but the energy costs over the 40 years obviously are lower. So we always obviously say, look at the full life cycle of the building and not just at initial investment cost. That's it's a pretty important factor. So to answer the question, can it be 100% self-sufficient? Can it be zero carbon, such a district? You see all these numbers, between 46 and 209% means you can put local photovoltaics and you can cover, in the worst case, only 50% of your energy. In the best case, you can cover 200%. So there's not a simple answer to it. Here it depends very much on the available roof space and whether you can, like in this one here, whether you can cover the complete roof with a single surface area. Then you can go up to 200%. You produce excess energy in such a district. If you need to put the modules in rows, you lose space, obviously, because you can't put them directly one behind the other for shading losses. And then you, in the best case, you can go up to maybe 100%. So, no, here on this side, 100%. So it's important to have this roof space, and it's a discussion. You can't have it all, I guess. You can't have the nice terraces, and be energy sufficient. So we need to be a bit honest on how we design the buildings and how they can cover their demand. And if it cannot be covered locally, then we need to have more central solutions in the cities, or in the region, and so on. And that's what we want to do in New York. Simulate the complete energy demand, do some scenarios, and see how much energy can be generated locally and how much needs to be imported. So that's a bit where we are. We started with our sort of pretty small, not very dense sort of cities in the southern German region. And if you look at this, I mean, this is nearly 40 communities, and they have on total about 100,000 buildings. New York City has 1 million buildings. So the question was, can we really do this simulation scaling up from 10,000, 100,000 buildings to 1 million? And yeah, it's possible. So we've got, as you see, a nice 3D model. I mean, it exists. It's openly available, and we can use it for simulation. And we did this. We started with a district in Brooklyn, and we're going to continue some actions here. I mean, the main question was, what happens to heating and cooling demand in pretty stressed electrical networks? So we got data from Con Edison on the demand. We modeled the thing. It fits reasonably well. I don't go into details because time is short. And then we run these scenarios of saying, okay, if you retrofit the buildings to a good energy standard, what does it do to heating? Heating goes down always. If you insulate, you save a lot of heating energy. Cooling is a bit more complicated. You only save in the hot months, because if you insulate in the sort of cooler months of May or so, you don't really save, because it's outside, it's maybe the same temperature as inside or even cooler, so insulation doesn't help. But you do save in the months where the grid is most stressed. So I think that will be an interesting application. Okay, to finish off, so this is more sort of scenario modeling for how cities develop, how the energy concepts work. But it's obviously more complicated. If you bring in more renewables, they fluctuate much more than your conventional coal power plant does, which nicely runs all year round. I mean, wind and solar don't run all year round. And to finish off, I want to show you actually a movie of a project that we did in Germany in collaboration with Spain and Switzerland, where we look at this sort of matching supply and demand on a much shorter time scale. And I just start the movie. I hope it starts, and then I will finish after that. It's just a few minutes. So this is a European project on demand response of buildings, and it will be explained in English even.
The level of energy use in buildings is not constant, meaning there are always peaks and troughs throughout the days and nights. National grids must always perfectly balance supply with this fluctuating demand. If this doesn't happen, it can become expensive to manage and can result in wasted power or power outages. When we burn fossil fuels for power, or use nuclear energy or even hydropower, we can meet this fluctuating demand by simply controlling the rate at which we generate electricity. But with more and more renewable energy sources being used, things get complicated. The problem is that electrical energy can't be easily stored, and renewable sources don't produce a constant, predictable output. When the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing, they produce less. This makes it difficult to balance supply and demand. So, because we can't easily control the supply, we must instead adjust the demand. This process is known as demand response. It involves shifting our electricity use from times with little renewable energy production on the grid to times when there is more. In other words, use power when the wind is blowing. The EC recognises this and is now funding the Sim for Blocks project to test demand response in blocks of buildings. By looking at blocks of buildings rather than individual homes, Sim for Blocks can explore more ways of implementing demand response, from the level of individuals living in the home all the way up to transmission system operators, who help ensure the stability of energy systems at a national level. To test demand response strategies, Sim4Blocks is using 3 pilot sites of blocks of highly energy efficient buildings in Spain, Switzerland and Germany that already have the necessary infrastructure. Here, residents are actively involved in the design and testing of these solutions. But how do we change when we consume our electricity? In some ways, it can be very simple. For instance, we can be encouraged to move the times when we do certain things, such as washing clothes or using dishwashers. Suggestions on load shifting and estimated savings could be delivered as alerts through an app, or the whole thing could be automated.
From when household appliances switch on to how our heating systems are managed, all helping us to improve our personal energy performance.
But demand response can also work at different levels. Energy suppliers can offer innovative energy tariffs to households to encourage demand response behaviour through savings. Blocks of buildings could be paid to turn certain energy loads on and off when needed. All of these methods together can combine to help balance the grid. But why are we doing this? At a personal level, demand response can give you greater control over your energy use and can help reduce your monthly energy bills. But on a broader scale, demand response will allow us to introduce more and more renewable energy sources into the grid, helping us to meet the EC's environmental targets that will steer our planet towards a greener future.
Okay, that's all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you. My name is Richard Graves. I'm the Chief Impact Officer and co-founder of Clean Choice Energy. Clean Choice Energy is a renewable energy supplier. We were the first renewable energy supplier to only supply 100% renewable energy. And this presentation is going to be a little different than some of the others. A lot of the others are going to focus about individual technology and innovations that people are bringing into this space. We've been really excited to see about the modeling technology, particularly for the cities, that Ursula and the rest of the team from Germany have really been bringing to the space. But what I'm going to do is look at the other side, which is actually look at it from the eyes of the consumer. Because at the end of the day, all the technology in the world isn't going to actually get us to the aims we want. Adoption of renewable energy, integration, penetration into the market without it actually being taken up by the consumer. And that's why for the new product innovation at Clean Choice Energy, we've always focused from the eye of the consumer. One of the things that we find is that the advanced technology, whether it is 3D modeling, mapping, energy, analysis, statistical estimates on the actual production and use in the buildings that we're seeing, that technology needs to be in service of a particular use. And so the service for us is actually radical simplicity. We find that most customers spend, we've seen estimates between 7 and 11 minutes per year thinking about energy. That's pretty crazy when you think about it. How many people in this room spend most of their career or time thinking about energy? Okay, it's a lot of folks. So we are not like them. That's the first thing to think about. Yet, at the same time, even in the United States, in a country where the very science of global warming has been politicized, many people do not believe in global warming, 91% of people in this country want clean energy. And about 7% of them are not sure and they like to learn a little bit more. So that's pretty much everybody. So clean energy is popular. And so the technology that we are building needs to be in service of actually enabling people who want this, but yet who do not understand it, to get it. And that's where we come from the idea of Clean Choice Energy is seeing through the eyes of the consumer. So there's a lot of technology that's coming in and coming to the customer's home. There are whole categories of technology, whether it's the Internet of Things, whether it's the production, generation of clean energy. The urban environment itself and people's homes is a nexus of a whole lot of technology that's coming in. And people are struggling a little bit to understand and deal with it. What they really want is a way to integrate this technology. So let me give you one example. How many people here get clean energy in their home? have signed up for it. We got a couple customers here, a lot of folks actually. How many of you would like to support a community solar farm? Right? I thought it'd be higher, but how would you like it if someone is building a community solar farm to power your house, right? Now, the fact is, the technology to do that is not always physical. We now know that solar panels, we know now that the technology of building solar is cheaper than ever. But the actual complexity is, where do you actually find a place to build it? So in New York City, for example, let me actually skip ahead to that. Ooh, let's see that slide. One of the things that happens is, in New York City, what happens is there is a huge amount of demand. People want clean energy, and they're willing to start by signing up for clean energy. And there's interest in doing more. But most of the solar that's being built in this state is being built upstate. It's being built where their developers have started from the technology first, where they found land cheaply, where they could build it. But there isn't the demand. Excuse me?
Could you just step to the side? So
Let me move over a little bit more. Okay,
Thank you.
so you can see a little better. So one of the issues is that complexity. Is if you look at the megawatt black hour program, for example, in New York, outside of the Con Ed region, we're already on block 11, which means it's almost fully subscribed across the entire state, and we're on block 2 out of 11 in Con Ed. What that means is there's a mismatch between supply and demand. When you look at this modeling, what you're finding is the biggest challenge is the complexity of actually navigating the issues of regulation, authority, taxation, placement, and transmission lines that others are dealing with is extreme. I just had some investors in who are coming in from Europe who are meeting, and they're saying we've built solar projects in South Africa, and Germany, and Turkey, and Mexico, and we've actually never seen it as complicated as right here in the United States, and particularly in New York. So what happens is, if I want to be a customer, and I want to find a solar farm in my area, in New York City, in Zone J, you have to find has to be within a specific roof. We all know real estate is a premium. But not only that, it has to be near a transmission line. Those transmission lines are on a map that has been distributed by Con Ed, but there actually been individual sites where they actually can take the transmission. Then, along with those transmission maps, you have buildings that need to have a certain size. They need to have a certain shading, you need to have a certain insulation, which means you have to actually look at not just that building, but every building that could shade it, which means mapping that site, mapping it to a transmission line. Can it hold enough solar? And in fact, there's solar costs that are different between, is it bigger than 200 kilowatts? Is it larger than 250 kilowatts? Has strong implications on the tariffs and incentive structures by the city of New York and by the state. And all of that has implications on the tax credits and the availability for project development. Now, nobody wants to know that. They just want to get community solar. And what that means is, what we do is we try to actually build a ladder of engagement where you can start with a simple product, something where someone can sign up and get renewable energy today. We're a retail energy supplier, that's what we do. And one of the things you get is when you sign some up is you have their energy usage. When you have the energy usage in their location, then you can take the 3D modeling technology and the other things to identify a site. They can start working on the development to find the location. And at the same time, what we need is a customer who is financeable, who has the demand, has a meter, and is actually willing to sign a long-term contract. We take the modeling on the customer side. So we take every customer in the United States, we actually cut them on about 2,000 data points, and actually take that information of who's likely to want renewable energy, who might have the credit score where they can actually get a project versus being able to sign up today, and where they live. And with that location, you can start matching the customer to the site. And then, once you have the customer in a contract with the site, you can actually finance to build and create a project. And so we consider some of this is every step where you get someone engaged in a simple process, where you can move them up the ladder of engagement, you can get to do more advanced technology, more advanced things without them having to actually done more on their end. The way I look at that is basically we use technology to manage complexity. And I think that's the thing that sometimes is a little bit missing when we're building this. We have really advanced software, we have really advanced ways of analyzing and looking at this. And at the end of the day, what we have to be able to present is actually strip away some of these issues so that someone who wants to do it can take that next step almost intuitively. And that is, I think, where it gets hard because you're managing so many different things. That's what we do. We focus on customer experience. In a lot of cases, what you find is, we started with retail, we're now doing community solar, we're working on new product innovation. We're really excited to be working with some of the other folks at the hub here. It's a really great community. And one of the things is, you don't need a rooftop, right? You don't need some of the things that have blocked. Only 87% of people in New York, for example, cannot access rooftop solar. What they do need, though, is that whole process. When someone, for example, is signing up for community solar, they're getting a separate bill than they are from the utility. Who's going to do the billing? If you have a question with your bill, how are you going to manage that? If you are getting production off of a roof, what happens if you manage it? All those things are in many ways solved problems, but what happens is the step and process from actually taking an urban environment like New York. So there's 1 million roofs in New York. About 2,500 of them are eligible for sites that are larger than 200 kilowatts for solar. You can then take those sites and then map them up for a very simple process, and then someone can go to a website and they can just say, oh, there's a solar farm in Park Slope. There's a solar farm in Gowanus. There's a solar farm in Bronx. And I think that's the part that we sometimes need to do, is we need to take our design methodology so that despite the fact that we care deeply about the innovation that we're doing, you give them the simplest possible experience. And in fact, I think that can be a bit of a magical technology experience in itself. And that's kind of what I want everyone to remember here is whether it's the green architecture, whether it's mapping, whether it's data and technology that allows someone to find something out, once you can get to that place where someone can just see that there is a simple, clear, direct way for them to make a difference, most people will. And that's our innovation at Clean Choice. And we're really looking forward to working with all of you on it in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard, for this presentation. I think we have a question and answer at the end of the session, and so that we get on and look at different aspects of this topic. And the next presentation will be given by one of my colleagues, Bernd Thomas from the University of Reutlingen, and he brings his own computer, which gives me time to put on the missing presentation.
I'm happy to be here. My name is Bernd Thomas from Reutlingen University. As Ursula said, we are part of the big project, this NSOurce project. Reutlingen is 25 miles south of Stuttgart. We have 100,000 people, so kind of a little cozy town, 5 times smaller than Stuttgart, and I think probably more than 100 times smaller than New York. So actually, to admit, I'm kind of exhausted from taking part of the pulse of New York during the last days, but I really appreciated it, and I was very happy to bring my kids and give them this experience as well. So we are pretty happy to be here, and actually we're happy to be, and I'm happy to be here just to present some of our results we achieved within this NSOurce project. And I will talk about energy management, and I will concentrate on the thermal side, because talking about energy management, everybody thinks about batteries, and battery management, which is of course developed by the car industry and others, and we are going to, I would like to show you how you can use the building itself. So the inertia of the building has a capacity, you can use it as well as a storage. But let's start. So talking about microgrids and virtual power plants, so the role of the building will change in future. And so this is the situation we have right now. So the building is right a consumer. It consumes electricity and consumes fuel for the heating system. In future, this will look completely different. We will have much more devices in the building, and probably don't see it as one single building. This might be an ensemble of buildings as well. So one has solar PV, another one has solar thermal. Then you have storages in the basement. You have batteries. You have thermal energy storage, either, as I said before, the building itself, or you have hot water tanks. You may have more advanced heating technologies instead of what you heard in the beginning. these old steam heating systems, you might have a micro CHP plant or a heat pump, which is more energy efficient. And of course, the big topic coming up is e-mobility. So you might charge your car by the electricity the micro CHP unit or the solar PV plant produces. And last but not least, very important, we have a lot of data available. So we have data about the grid, data about tariffs, and of course, why not manage all these different devices in the houses in order to have it a very energy efficient as well as cost efficient way to run your devices with respect to the data coming from the outside. So the utility gives you different tariffs, and then you can use them just to run your system. I would like to show you how you can do that. And in order to get a bit of flexibility, shall I now run the heat pump or shall I not run it? You need one crucial thing, and this is energy storages. So energy storages will provide the flexibility to decide, shall I run a system or shall I not run it? And there are, of course, as I said in the beginning, two types of storages. One is electric. Everybody thinks about batteries when you think about storages. However, there are thermal storages as well. And I would like to make the point that they should be used and utilized as well. So what we did in Reutlingen within this project, we developed an algorithm to enable you just to manage the thermal storage. And this might be, I say again, either hot water tank, latent heat storage, giving more capacity, or as I said, the thermal inertia of the building itself. Just very, very brief how we do it. Think of the 24 hours of a day and of the heat demand. So it starts down here at 0 and it goes up to the daily heat demand after 24 hours. Having an energy storage hot water tank, you have this red line, and in between, so you can see these two lines. The blue one is the storage completely discharged, state of charge 0%, and the red line is the energy storage fully charged. So within these two lines, there is where the fun starts, where you really can decide, shall I run my heat pump to produce the heat, or shall I take the heat from the thermal storage? So we call this the area of decision or the band of flexibility, because within here you can be flexible, decide how to manage your devices. And I show you a schedule like this. So this might be any arbitrary schedule of the micro CHP or the heat pump. And you can think of a lot of them. And how we do it, the point now is just to find the optimum schedule in order to fulfill any objective function. And this objective function might be cost, might be usage of renewables, might be energy efficiency, whatever. So why not just create a whole bunch of these schedules? It looks like this. So we create hundreds, thousands of these schedules. It's pretty easy, just by random. And for each schedule, we calculate your objective function. And then we simply take the best. We just pick the best. And then it looks like this, for instance. The green one is from all these gray schedules, the best one, according to the objective function. That this was here just to, this is the system of a micro CHP and a solar PV. And of course, we would like that they produce as much electricity needed in the house. And during noon, when we have the PV, then we use the PV electricity. And during night, when there is no sun, the CHP unit is running. You see here, these blocks are the CHP blocks. So according to this pretty simple example, you can see how we manage, just by managing the thermal storage tank, that we achieve just a good composition and a good combination of the CHP unit and the PV. Simply by, as I said, managing this hot water tank. What do we give it probably in numbers? So this is the percentage of the electricity we can use by ourselves from this micro CHP unit. If we do not do anything with the thermal storage, just run it heat-oriented or heat-led, as we said, you just gain 18%. So 18% of the electricity you produce, you can use by yourself in this example. And if you just apply what I explained before, these thermal modeling and this thermal scheduling, you can go up to 25%. And if you just apply some more ad hoc direct lines, so whenever there is electricity need in the house, you turn on the micro CHP unit immediately, then you can go up to 31%. Just almost, we are able to almost double from here 18% to 31%, again, just by simply managing this thermal hot water tank. There's not much else to do. This is the thermal energy management algorithm we developed. Another example or another result, of course, we are not against batteries. Of course, you can use a battery and then you can go even higher. So the same number you saw before, you see here on the y-axis. Now it's higher. It goes to 75-80% because you have a battery. And of course, the bigger the battery, the more of the solar PV you can store and you can use by yourself. However, if you only use the battery, it looks like this black curve. If you apply, in addition, the thermal management of this hot water tank in the basement, 700, 900 liters, you see this orange curve. And now, please compare horizontally, like this red arrows show you. So, for instance, you would like to have a share of 90% of the electricity produced by the CHP and the solar PV. If you do it without the management, you need a battery of about 5 kilowatt hours. If you apply this method I showed you before, you see the orange curve. You are here at 3 kilowatt hours roughly. So you can just reduce the size of the battery. And battery is still, even though everybody says they're getting cheaper and cheaper, they are still costly. So you can reduce the size of the battery and you can have the same amount of electricity produced by the solar or the micro CHP you will use on site, and you don't have to buy the electricity. So this is quite interesting for us, and we try to apply this algorithm to other features. For instance, we call it two-tank model. So now I give some snapshots about what is going on right now in our research. You have to apply to only one thermal hot water tank. You can have two, as you see here. Then you just have two of these bands of flexibility. You just double what I explained before, and you can even triple it. So it's pretty easy just to take more of these storages into account. Here's some numbers as well. So this is a heat pump running with a hot water tank. Without the management, you're here by solar PV consumption. If you apply this method I showed before, you see the solid lines, and you're able to increase your solar PV consumption by 19%. Again, just by simply managing this hot water tank. However, this hot water tank here, the size is on the x-axis, is about 2 cubic meter. So this is not the pool you have, but it's still a big tank. And instead of using a hot water tank, and this is the last slide I have, and the last idea I would like to bring here, is just use the thermal inertia of the building. I just explained at the beginning. We did this here. So here you see we just allow the room temperature vary between 20 and 20 degrees C. So this is probably something you just mentioned, just to be a little more aware and about energy utilization, save energy, or just allow the energy to vary a little. If you allow, and by this means you can just use the capacity of your walls and of the floor to store this thermal energy, and we can do that actively and manage it, and you see all these gray schedules again, taking the best schedule. And by this means, here we have a heat pump and a solar PV, and we just use the thermal inertia of the building to enable the heat pump running right here during the times where we have solar PV, because that's what you want. If you have solar PV, of course you would like to use the electricity directly to run the heat pump. And you can do this, of course, during noon. However, the heat demand is a little higher, so there is the need for running the heat pump in the night, so there are these two blocks as well. However, this is just ideas, this is just the algorithm, and we are going to apply it now in these different fields. And finally, this is what we are at right now, and we were able to attract some more research money with that, because actually what it is, and this is quite a hot topic in Germany right now, we call it coupling the heat and the electricity sector. So talking about energy efficiency, the first step was talking about electric sector, saving electric energy. Now we come to the heat sector, and just coupling heat and electricity gives you more opportunities to make the system energy efficient and cost efficient. And so we started out with this N-Source project, developing this algorithm, and now we apply it for heat pumps. In this project, we apply it for CHP units running in industry. In industry using a lot of energy, this is galvanic industry. We as well try to turn it around. We have demand-side management. We try to apply this algorithm to demand-side management. In this project, as you see we are just having $1 million in research funds just for the Reutling Energy Center to run these projects, because we were able to interest the governments for what we are doing. There's another proposal we're running right now just to have the flexibility of biogas CHP units as well. So with this outlook, I would like to end. As I said, I just wanted to show the potential of the thermal management of hot water tanks or of buildings. So thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess that was a bit more complex than just installing thermostats, but these are research projects funded actually currently in Germany, and it's already quite a complex energy system, as you can imagine. But now we get back to New York, and Block Power yesterday did very interesting presentations to bring this sort of energy transition into practice, and especially in pretty difficult environments, in social housing even, and how they do it is now going to be presented by Michelle and Gavin.
Thank you. So, like Ursula said, we do serve, in particular, predominantly underserved communities, and we do a lot of energy modeling to do this work. So, Block Power, these are 5 different things that you guys should definitely know about Block Power. So the first one is Community Retrofit NYC. This is a program of the Mayor's Office of Sustainability for the City of New York, and they have hired us as their program implementer. It's part of their 80 by 50 commitment to reduce 80% of the city's greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. And this program is built to serve 5 to 50 unit multifamily buildings across central and northern Brooklyn and southern Queens. We're also working on what's called the Bronx Healthy Buildings Challenge. It's a fund that we're working with 2 financial institutions to deploy capital in the Bronx. The Bronx, if you guys aren't aware, has the highest rate of childhood asthma in the state of New York. So the goal of this fund is to reduce hospitalizations due to air quality issues. Back when we were first founded, the Department of Energy actually gave us a grant to create a marketplace to fund energy efficiency projects for smaller sized buildings, which is something that we specialize in. Anderson Horowitz is one of our first investors. He's a pretty big name if you guys follow those kinds of things. If you don't, that's cool too. And last but not least, our co-founder and CEO, Danelle Baird, was named the White House Champion of Change back in 2014. So we're pretty proud about that as well. So Block Power serves predominantly buildings under 50,000 square feet. Now, that's pretty different than most of the energy efficiency work that gets done around the world. But as you can see, the vast majority, 95% of the buildings are under 50,000 square feet. Now, you might wonder why nobody else is serving this market, but it's predominantly the savings potential per building. So if you have a smaller building, the actual amount of dollars that you're going to save, even if the percentage is the same, is a much smaller number. So to hire an engineering firm to figure out what you should do becomes much more cost prohibitive. So this is something that we definitely need to fix, because if we don't serve these 95% of buildings, we will never reach the goals that we have to fight climate change. So one of the tools that we do to flatten the cost of the work that we do is what we call is by targeting certain buildings. So through modeling, through different public data and private data that we have, some of it's on behalf of the city, we created a targeting platform to create an actual score of every building between 5 and 50 units in the parts of Brooklyn and Queens that we serve, to identify the most likely buildings to require retrofits and to complete retrofits for their buildings. So our business development team uses this in a variety of different ways. The city, for the community retrofit program, has an emphasis on community-based outreach. So one example is figuring out where are clusters of 5 to 50 unit buildings in Bed-Stuy, for example, and then which ones are the most likely to convert. So we did several canvassing campaigns, and this was a very helpful tool for our business development team to go out and do the work that they need to do.
And now now I'll go through some of the analysis that we run in the back end to support these energy efficiency projects. One of the tools that we use to estimate building energy consumption is energy modeling. And traditionally, this has been a time-consuming and expensive process. So to be able to serve our market, we have to bring the cost down, and to do so, we automated the process, basically. And I'll go through the methodology right now. So based on publicly available building dimension data, we're able to build a 3D model of your building. And in addition to that, we use our building archetype database to fill in the additional information required for energy modeling, such as what type of construction you have, the operating hours, and such. And at the bottom here, you can see a visual representation of the energy model. So now for our city analytics, we combine this energy modeling that I just described with statistical modeling to be able to predict energy consumption across the city for our typology of buildings. And the statistical model is trained basically from the proprietary information that we get from all our projects throughout the Brooklyn and Queens. So this was a quick way to benchmark the buildings. Now to go one step further, where we want to understand what is the appropriate energy efficiency measure we want to recommend to our client, we ran a sensitivity analysis to understand how different parameters affect the energy consumption in your building. To do so, we use a Monte Carlo simulation framework where we basically varied some of these parameters that you can see here. These are all related to building envelope parameters. And as you can see, infiltration, reducing infiltration in the building could lead the most energy savings. And this relates to how well you seal your building. However, you have to keep in mind that there's a minimum requirement for infiltration to maintain a certain indoor air quality. And other examples of parameters we looked at, external wall U values, basically adding insulation to the walls, window U values, changing the windows, which also affect the infiltration. So based on this information, we can appropriately suggest the right energy efficiency measures that would yield the highest energy saving.
So we have a second actually mapping tool that we use. This is primarily used for both cities and customer acquisition. You can find it on our website. It's called Block Maps. So any building between 5 and 50 units in New York City, you can find on there, and it will be shaded between a yellow and a red. Everything else is outside of that range because we don't have sufficient data to model that building. But this is a tool for cities where they can better do urban planning and identify where they should be investing their funds, but also for a single building owner to go on and check how likely their building is in needs of upgrades, claiming that building, and then putting in utility information to actually get the process started about learning more about their building and seeing what can be done to reduce their utility costs and increase the efficiency. So the next step in here on our dashboard is on the back end. This is a tool for our engineers to do the work that they need to do. So it's a project management tool. We are tasked with greening 1,000 buildings across New York City, so we definitely can't do this with pen and paper. So this tool is used to help flatten the costs, do the all the fancy engineering work that Michelle and the rest of our team has to do to make it a lot easier. It has things like building dimensions. It'll take in the utility information and disaggregate it for them. You can also do different investment modeling. Yes? Hmm?
Building.
Sure.
So I can visualize what it looks like. Could you please describe it? I mean, are we looking at something like this building, or are we looking
Sure.
at
So we're looking at. Yeah, so a brownstone would be on the smallest end of it, but we're looking at a pre-war walk-up, probably don't have an elevator, the kind of building that was described earlier. So residential, yeah. So, how many of you here live in New York City? Sure, yeah. So this would be probably a four-story walk-up. You got 2 to 4 units per floor. It's probably a steam-heated pre-war building. Yeah. Does that give you a bit? You could have predominantly mom and pop. Yeah. So the larger property management firms oftentimes have people on staff, or they're a little bit more in tune with what's going on with the space, what kinds of systems are most efficient. But the mom and pop kind of building owners aren't really able to do this. They probably have a job. They might have inherited the building from someone who might have gotten in the 70s. So the city has tasked us with providing that technical assistance, engineering modeling, financial modeling, to help them figure out what's the best plan for their building, and also how to get that done. So this includes connecting them to contractors, financing, and a little bit beyond the energy modeling that we're talking about here today. But this dashboard allows us to bring all of that together and do that in one place, and actually provide the client a login so that they can see everything that the engineers can see. And then here's a quick view of the internal engineering tool. As you can see in the top right, this address has a potential 22.25% savings for their total utility usage, which is roughly $15,000. And this is provided free on behalf of the city. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
So basically, all the technical analysis that I discussed earlier, it runs in the back end of this, and this is the outcome of our analysis. We provide this information to the client, and they can make an informed decision on what kind of measures they want to implement in their buildings. Yep.
That's the savings. What's the investment cost for taking?
So this would be the net savings. I mean the gross savings. So this project is not that far along. So I honestly don't know yet. I can tell you 2324 Picken Avenue is not a completed project yet. So it's not there yet. They're soliciting contractors. So no, I don't know that. Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. We now talk more about business models, and the presentation will be given by my colleague. You want to use your own computer? High risk. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Ursula, for the introduction. My name is Dieter Hörtweg from the Hermann Hollerith Center in Böbling, and it's a kind of graduate school for the Faculty of Informatics, and we work a bit on the digital change of our region. We have there a lot of IT industry and car industry, and I especially run a laboratory for business model development, and that's also the task I have in the NSOurce network. We're working together with Ursula, and what is a business model at the beginning? It's a structured model that answers the questions: who is my customer? What do I offer to him? How do I deliver my products and services? How do I achieve value? And all these questions can be answered with a business model. And if you want to have it a bit more complex, because that's the case with our business models, if you're working in energy networks, we use an ontology with the name E3 Value from the Netherlands to simulate business models in quite complex environments. So for example, in an energy network, from the end customer over the power supplier, the distribution network operator, or the transmission network operator are actors in that network. And that's the case today. If we're talking about business models in Germany, the time has changed. From the former centralized energy value chain, from power generation over transmission, distribution, retail down to consumer, to much more complex energy networks, which will be possible today because of a computer and the internet, and the symbiosis between IT and the energy networks. And the drivers for that are for sure the regulation, and the first driver in Germany was Fukushima. You can see this little atomic mushroom. So this was the starting point. We had then this energy change in Germany, and from there on we start with energy markets, with regulation that foster renewable energies, and with the technologies today we have the opportunity to run totally different value networks and therefore different business models. At first I would present a use case from our energy network NSource. It's a typical SME use case, a B2B business model. It's a botanical garden located in the Lake of Constance, beautiful area, southern Germany. And this botanical garden has about 5,000 visitors a day. And therefore you can imagine that they have also, beside energy efficiency goals, also ecological goals you have to keep in mind. And they have today different energy production facilities. And the question for us was in the project, how should a future energy system look like and a business model look like? And if we're talking today about successful business models in Germany, a successful business model today is one who prevents you from taxes, to be honest. This was different about 2-3 years ago. Till there it was more valuable to produce solar energy and feed it in the grid. And today it's better if you don't do it, and if you use this energy you produce by yourself. So you can prevent 23.6% of the taxes. And that's a thing you should keep in mind if we go a bit further in the business models. So like I said, the successful ones will be the one where you consume as much of your own produced energy as possible. And we did there an economical analysis of the energy system itself, then an environmental analysis to look for the ecological impacts of the energy system, and at least we looked for the return on investment from a business perspective of the whole company. And starting with the optimization of the energy system, today this island imports most of its energy from outside. It's green energy they source because they have there, for example, glass houses which need a lot of energy and heat to warm the plants, the beautiful plants. And with the first scenario, we use wood DCP because they have there a lot of biomass. And this was done by my colleague, Bernd Thomas. He's researcher working on that. And on top of that, we plan in the first scenario to use much more solar energy than they use today, to prevent the company from importing external energy. And in the second scenario, we even use more solar energy than in the first one. And in the third one, we use the maximum possible solar energy. You can see it here. The capacities of the first scenario will be additional 180 megawatt per year, and a kilowatt per year, and the second one 750 kilowatt per year, and the third one 3 megawatt roundabout. And what you can see there is the distribution between the solar energy here, the PV, and the CHP with wood pellets and biomass they already have there. And they also have a biogas converter there where they can use biomass too. And if you look at these three scenarios, the first two promise a self-consumption, and the third one with maximum solar energy would be the best from an economical point of view, but it's not now allowed since a year by law that you use your own energy if you have more than one megawatt PV capacity. So if you have more, you have to export it. And if you have to export, then you have the problem that you get not so much money for. And so that's the reason why it makes no sense to export the money, and you have to pay the taxes. That's the main reason. So it's not possible by law to use scenario number 3. But even if we use scenario number 2, it would be better, but there was no return on investment because for the additional facilities of the solar cells, it pays not out. So scenario 1 at the end of the day was the best one. We can save 40% of taxes for the company, and it's a scenario that pays out at the end of the day. But it's not so aggressive. After 15 years, you have a return on investment on scenario 1. But in Germany, we have a time span of 20 years, which is guaranteed by law. So it makes sense to go into scenario 1 and use this first enhancement of solar energy capacity. And if you look then on the network, it's quite complex. So we did a transfer from scenario 1 to the value network. Here you have all the partners which will be involved, and you can simulate with our opportunities the benefits and cost every partner will have from this future scenario to get an idea how willing they are to go into contracts and what are their benefits. That regulation is a big issue. You can see also on a second use case we have in our project in the community of Rheinau. They try to go into the same direction like an already existing grid in Germany in the city of Haßfurt. And there you have nearly every element in the smart grid which was available in the last years. They started with wind energy. They use the wind energy to store the surplus in a biogas facility of a biofarmer. So you can chemically bring out the biogas. You can change it to natural gas. And this can be then tanked, for example, in cars. So Audi did there a cooperation with them. And you can get a cheaper Audi if you will be a member of this energy association. And they also use, for example, the roofs of their social welfare houses for poor people to give them money back from these solar cell installations. So it was a whole very integrated idea of community economics. And it's even a city with 25,000 people. It's not a so small countryside village. And so you could see what was possible in 2010. When we try a similar approach in 2017, it was not possible because a central element, the biogas utilization, wasn't supported further by the government. You have so low fees today that this element makes no sense, but it was coming from one year to another. And that's the thing I want to present you. It's quite hard in Germany sometimes with the regulation to plan on a 20 years dimension, which is the case if you go through all these plannings. There are a few business models. They already work quite well. That's Bassen, for example. It's an energy community, and they do the same thing. They link the energy producer with the consumers inside their balance group, and that's allowed in Germany. So you try to transmit as much as possible energy between the members of the community, and the members pay a kind of flat rate to the platform provider that he does the management with the energy exchange. And the surplus produced inside the balance group will then be traded on the energy market, on the German energy market. And that's a community business model which is working at the moment, successful. They don't get rich. There are a lot of, I would say, idealistic people, but they also don't not pay money. So it's a business model that works. But for the people, they are very enlightened in this community. they do something good for the environment, and it costs not more than if they go to another traditional energy provider. And a business model which works much better and where you can earn money with is the business model of the Sonnen GmbH. They act as a virtual battery plant. Their community members own batteries because Sonnen is a battery producer in Germany. And so the community, the energy community members own the batteries, and they give Sonnen 20% of their battery capacity to stabilize the transfer network of TNET. And for this money, for this stabilization performance, you can get a lot of money on the intraday market. And the batteries are very fast in balancing. So it's a good business model at the moment where all the members have a benefit from, and the administration, which will normally make a lot of effort, is done by a blockchain technology provided by IBM, and that works fantastically well. So they really earn money at the moment. Going further to a few, I would say, playground business models for utilities at the moment in Germany, I have two of them. One is a business model in the area of e-mobility, where we transferred experiences from the Berlin model to Stuttgart based on data. We did their heat maps with our students, and there you can see the progress from 2016 to 2017. And we can realize that most of the clients use their e-scooter along the public transport stations. So this was a good information for the utility there to bring in the e-scooter network into the public transport network, and they run now an app where you can have an interlinkage between the two mobility systems. And this decision was based on our analytics. So we analyzed thousands of kilometers in these 2 years. And we also tried to find the optimum price structure. So there was a comparison between a flat rate model and a pay-per-use model. And we could show that if you drive less than 30 minutes a day, it makes no sense to go into a flat rate model. And for most of the customer, it was an obstacle to subscribe and to make an identification. It's easier to sit on a scooter and drive along. And we did this calculation based on the empirical data of 2 years. So this was also a support of this business model. Another business model at the moment, which is in research, not in laboratories, not in reality, is the idea to use smart home data in future from smart meter to track and to predict human health diseases. And this should help people, older people in their houses still to be able to live there. And on the other hand, you can really analyze there a lot of things if you combine this data with fitness belts. And if you do that, you would be able to adapt their new health services, like monitoring services of the elder people. But it also raises the question of information self-determination and data security. These are all discussions we have to operate in future. On the other hand, there is a big value if you're able to realize scenario like that, because our society gets older and older. Then I will finish with a conclusion. I think what we can do is between our two countries, we can have research on business models that are based on digital and new technical innovations. And I think we can also have interesting exchange on business models that are based on data and databases. And I think it can be also interesting in future to have research about the question how technology and regulation interact with each other between the two cultures and countries, and also an exchange on business modeling methods like business model configurators I'm working on at the moment, or regulation risk monitoring systems, or regional business model crawling applications can be quite interesting. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Dieter. Sorry we are running a bit late, but the last talk will be quite entertaining, so it makes a nice transition into the drinks and food session. And the presentation will be given by Felix Tuben, who makes also a perfect connection between Stuttgart and New York, because he's worked in Stuttgart and he's now for 1 year in New York, working for a company that's also operating in both sides. And he will talk about climate responsive urban design and explain why climate change is a reality.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Felix. I'm working for an engineering firm that's called Transolar. And I'd like to start out with this slide. I think that most of the world has understood global warming is a real thing. For those who haven't, this is the last proof. And maybe somebody could send this to the American president. Maybe he would understand that. But in order to limit global warming, we have to reduce our CO2 emissions, our carbon emissions, especially in the built environment. I guess we all understand that. But if we talk about green buildings, we often see something like that. So this is what a lot of people understand when we talk about green buildings. It's something that is, the design is wrong at the beginning, and then we just add gadgets to achieve the efficiency. So we add a solar panel, we add a green roof, we add a bike rack, and we connect it to the public transport, and then we achieve LEED Gold with this building. But nobody is actually questioning the thing, the hammer here, if it makes sense. And what my company stands for and what we're trying to achieve is efficiency driven by design. Designing buildings, helping the architect to design buildings that are efficient by design, such as this sailboat, where every fiber is just optimized for its purpose. I've mentioned we're still a small company, although we have 4 offices, 2 in Germany, in Stuttgart and Munich, 1 in Paris and 1 here in New York. What we do is we call it climate engineering or climate responsive design. And to explain this a little bit, I don't know why we have this slide off, but okay. To explain this a little bit more in detail, we try to take advantage of natural energy sources on site. We're taking advantage of physical effects, such as a stack effect, for example. And we're looking for an integrated design that is not relying only on system, it's more relying on the building itself, creating exceptional indoor environment. And by the way, it should consume as less energy as possible. Alejandro Aravena, the director of the Venice Biennale 2016, described Transolar, our company, as cutting-edge engineering at the service of common sense. And I like this description a lot, because I feel like what we're doing is actually going back to common sense and bringing common sense back to architecture and design, which was lost in somehow along the way. Going back actually 100 years, this is the beginning of the 20th century and a view of the beautiful Flatiron building here in New York City. And what we can see here, we have everywhere external shading, we have openable windows, we have shallow buildings, people are located close to the facade to have access to daylight. And mostly because electricity was either not available or very cheap, so very expensive. so they had to rely on natural resources. And 100 years later, our cities look like this. You know that city, but you might not know these cities because the skyline looks all the same. And I'll show you what it is. We have all over the planet the same situations that buildings have these kind of facades. There's no operable window. There's no external shading. The glass is so tinted that you don't even get white light inside the building anymore. And the shape of the building is so wide that there are many workspaces where you don't even have access to daylight. And on top of that, those buildings, in case of a power outage, people have to leave those buildings because you cannot survive in there. So the question is now, do we have to go back to a Flatiron building in the beginning of the 20th century? Do we have to live in that? No. I think with this, we have to marry climate engineering or climate responsive design with contemporary architecture and design. And unfortunately, we can only see half of it. I brought a project that we did together with KPMG architects in Canada. It's the Manitoba Hydro headquarters for the company, utility company Manitoba Hydro in Winnipeg. And fortunately, this company was very ambitious in terms of sustainability goals, wanted to reduce the energy demand by 60% compared to the Canadian code. And also very ambitious when we talked to them, how they described how they want an exceptional workspace for their workers. So we looked at the climate of Winnipeg. As we always do at the beginning, we analyze the climate of the site. And Winnipeg is actually really cold. So if you throw boiling water in the air in wintertime, it freezes instantaneously. So looking at this chart, and you see here from January to December, we have minus 35 degrees Celsius in the wintertime, so very cold. And I guess with the Fahrenheit scale, this is where it's more or less the same. And then we have a short period where we have like relatively comfortable outdoor conditions, and then it gets really hot, or it gets also quite hot in summer, around 35 degrees, which is roughly 95 Fahrenheit. So we have this huge temperature swing, but then we talked to the people there, and they said, like, when it's really cold out there, it's actually quite sunny. So we looked into that, and this is a chart that shows the solar radiation on a south facade, on a vertical facade for Toronto, which is the first bar, the purple bar, and then the next bar is Winnipeg average, and the yellow bar is a Winnipeg clear day. So what you can see here in the winter time, where we have cold average temperatures, we have a lot of solar gains on the facade. So we said to ourselves, if there is any location in the world that is ideal for a passive solar concept, it's Winnipeg. So we started out, it was a huge process of getting the testing for different massing options from the architectural form, in particular the urban integration and its impact. I'll just show two of the final, let's say, approaches. And you can see here what was important across the street was a very important plaza for Winnipeg, which is the Air Canada Plaza, and we realized where people have lunches during the springtime outside, and we realized we call this the daylight tower. We cannot do that because it will shade this plaza that I'm talking about here. So we came up with this kind of solar tower with this huge winter garden facing the south. And those are six-story winter garden, six floor levels, 3 times stacked on top of each other. And if we look at the floor plan, it looks like this. This is the south winter garden that functions as a kind of, or south atrium functions as a kind of buffer zone. We have also a north atrium over there, and then we integrated a double facade also as kind of a buffer zone. There was a huge discussion, can we go with a single layer facade or a double facade? Theoretically, architects always try to achieve a single layer facade. With triple glazing, we ended up with the double facade because it has a lot of benefits, especially for this cold climate. And cost-wise, it wasn't even so much more expensive than triple layer glazing, which is quite normal in this climate. So in my next slides, I want to talk real quick about the heating and cooling system, the energy concept of the building. This south winter garden, the south atrium that I've described already, is basically the lung of the building. This is where we draw the air in. It gets heated. It's basically a huge solar collector. It gets preheated and then drawn further in the raised floor level, where we have displacement ventilation, where we ventilate the office spaces, and then it gets pulled down in this chimney down into the basement, where we have heat recovery to transfer the heat back into our atrium, bring it back in the atrium. Additionally, we have a radiant heating and cooling system and a ceiling to buffer or to provide heating and cooling for the office spaces. In summertime, when we don't need heat recovery, the air gets directly gets ventilated in this kind of chimney. We call it a solar chimney. It's kind of a natural driven ventilation without any mechanical systems. And a chimney effect, when we talk about a chimney effect, we understand that warm air is rising, but sometimes during the summer we have indoor and outdoor the same air temperature level. So we need to, let's say, overheat the air to keep the airflow running. And this is what we do in this part of the chimney. This is why we call it a solar chimney. This is glazed with black tubing in there, so it heats up the air up there and keeps the flow running, and the building is ventilated without a mechanical system. This is actually the view into this south atrium, and we call it, because it's kind of our air handling unit, it's maybe the most beautiful air handling unit we have ever designed. You can actually see, or you cannot see, this is the good part, and also this taskbar is a little bit in the way, but down here where you see these benches, we have the air intake. This feature that you see over here is a water wall where we humidify the air in the winter, because cold air is very dry, and where we dehumidify the humid air in the summertime with this water feature. Another view also into this atrium is you see here, and actually even yoga classes are happening in the air handling unit, which is, I think, quite good use of this space. This is a view of the north atrium. Also, this was not really intended, but just people liked this space, and they put a table here in there, some chairs for some informal meetings. And yeah, how good did we end up actually with the building? This is compared to all existing buildings in Canada. It's just like they consume roughly 570 kilowatt hours per square meters. If the new buildings are a little bit less, and the energy code, buildings according to the code are roughly 260 kilowatt hours, Manitoba Hydro ends up by 88 kilowatt hours, what we have designed it for, so according to our simulations. So, and typically this is where our work stops. And we say, like, okay, built this building, we promised or we predicted this kind of consumption. But in this case, we stayed on the project a little bit longer, also because the client was so ambitious he wanted to know how it works. And we did some kind of post occupancy evaluation, and it's pretty interesting. And I think this is absolutely not uncommon, that this is the energy consumption per month, the annual rolling energy totals separated in months, and these are 18 months from completion. And you see actually at the beginning the energy consumption was doubled so high as predicted from our energy model. And over the time, when we fixed some things, some little things were not working well, and in particular, the vending machines in there consume as much energy as a single-family home in Germany. So we had to adjust here a little bit. So we brought it down even actually better at the end after 18 months of, let's say, post-evaluation. And I think that's a very important point in the built environment, that many buildings perform more on this side if nobody is looking at it. But not only performance is so remarkable of this building, it's also interesting that things like the solar chimney, that is actually something more mechanical to keeps the airflow moving through the building, is kind of became something iconic for this building, became architecture. So we're very proud about that. And I want to come back real quick to this double skin facade, because we introduced this, I promised earlier, it had another advantage. We could allow natural ventilation in this climate with the double facade. The picture on the right that you see is the outer facade that opens automatically when outdoor conditions are in a comfortable range. And then the inner facade, people have to open the windows manually. And they get, because we're not in America and yeah, people need some kind of hint that now it's time to open the window and rely on on natural ventilation. And they also get a hint when they have to close it. So we introduced in their desktop some kind of notification. Now your building is in natural ventilation mode. Please open the window. And people are doing this, which shows the next chart, roughly 40% throughout the year, hours throughout the year, the building is in natural ventilation mode and people are opening the window. Now you could say like, okay, we forced them to and they are cold and they don't like it. But interestingly, and this is also very unique about this project, we got from actually Manitoba Hydro, from the client back, this information that they have less service calls. They have still a couple of running office in Winnipeg. They have less service calls in the new building than they have in the old building, and 30 to 50 fewer temperature complaints. So it actually works, and people are happy in there. And one last point, which is also very interesting: 1.25 fewer sick days per employee per year. If you do, this data is not from us. This is from the utility company. And if you do the math, the saving that you have by this number, the cost saving that you have by this number compared to energy savings is factor 5 higher, I would say, per year. So it's very interesting, and I think this is a very successful project from our side that shows how climate engineering can be introduced in contemporary architecture. Thank you.
Thank you for attending. Thank you for the organizers for Osters here. And, well, don't leave, take some drinks and talk to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.